GearNetwork.com.
This is a Gear Network production.
You spring, I spring, we all spring for Teespring. You know what that means? As corny as that was, yes, I know it was corny as hell, we have a t-shirt store. It is up and it is running. And right now we have 8 shirts, but it is growing. The merchandise is growing. Right now we have shirts going from as little as $13 for a TJCMS first t-shirt to $20 for a Gear Network logo t-shirt. All of them available to be delivered right to your front door. You choose your size, you choose your style, and you go. It's as simple as that, and there are plenty more t-shirts to come, but take a look at our Teespring store. If you go to GearNetwork.com, under the Support the Shows banner and 4 links down is Gear Merchandise. That will take you directly to our Teespring store, and you can see all of our selection of our current shirts right now, our current merchandise. Thank you again for all of your support and using our links on GearNetwork.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Better Live Than Dead podcast.
Welcome to the podcast. This is a podcast. This is the Better Live Than Dead podcast. I am Ryan Wolfe, one half of the Better Live Than Dead podcast duo at Wolfe BLTD on Twitter, joined on the line by Brayton Wilson at BJ Wilson WGR on the tweet box. How you doing today, bub?
Oh, it's a really nice Monday outside. I'm just out here in Ellicottville, New York. It's very sunny, very nice and cool, and enjoying myself, enjoying a beer, and ready to go.
I just finished mowing my lawn. I thought either I go to the gym or I mow the lawn. I thought about doing both, but instead I ate some saltwater taffy and mowed my lawn. That's a very adult thing to do.
That sounds like a very adult thing to do. It sounds great, actually.
And you know what? If this podcast goes about as long as I think it will, I might be able to sneak over to the gym that closes at 9 and get a quick gym session. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how that one goes. I'm not going to push it.
Well, there you go. That'll be a nice little double duty there for you.
Now, looking into the crystal ball here, you will see me tweet here shortly that I did not go to the gym. That's probably what will happen, but it is ultimately the thought that counts. So at this point, I must mention it is episode 120. A lot of podcasts. We haven't podcasted in a while. It's actually been about a month. We're sorry about that, but hey, we're back. And that's the most important part right now. Normally we'll talk about the Buffalo Sabres, and we'll get to them today. But with the Stanley Cup playoffs headed towards the Stanley Cup final, and I do suggest you read up and remember that it is the Stanley Cup final, despite the fact that they play multiple games. I don't know why, but it's the rules, and you must follow the rules. That's just how the world works these days.
It's an easy way to remember this. It's the NBA Finals and then the Stanley Cup Final. That's how you differentiate the playoffs between the NBA and the Stanley Cup. The NHL, I should say, but make it simple.
And just follow the rules. Just follow the rules.
Exactly.
So with that being said, first off, we're staring down the barrel of Game 6 tonight. Tampa tonight being Monday, May 21st. For those of you interested in dating this podcast, Tampa versus Washington. I would have to say for sure, and we don't have to go too deep into this, but just really, I agree with Alex Ovechkin when he says it is the biggest game of his career. Washington finally became the Giant Slayer and got past Pittsburgh. Looked like they were going to roll to an easy victory against Tampa and got knocked on their asses. And now they're staring down a 3-2 deficit. And it's not looking too good for them. But hey, I always ask and I always wonder, and this is something we can probably talk about in the future if it does happen. But if Washington doesn't do it this year and at least get to the Cup final, you got to wonder what they have to do to shake things up a bit, because you've been trying the same thing for a while now, and it hasn't been working. So at this point, you got to try to figure out what's going on with that and go from there. I mean, that's about as deep as I'm going to go, because we don't have a victor yet, and I don't want to talk out the side of my face and say, hey, guess what? I'm going to say all these words and then be wrong.
Giant hashtag and hot take. Trade Ovechkin.
You might have to, and you know what? It might not be a bad idea, but hey, at this point, we'll see. I'm always team trade Ovechkin, just because I'm for the craziest things happening, which brings me to the Western Conference. The improbable has happened. The Vegas Golden Knights are in the Stanley Cup final. And kind of go on a mini rant here real quick. So just follow along. It'll be a quick one, I promise. People getting upset that Vegas is in the Stanley Cup final. They say it's bad for the game. Well, you know what? I think the exact opposite, because you look at this team and you see a group of guys who were not wanted in one way or another. You've got Jonathan Marchessault, who was acquired in a trade. He's arguably the best player in the team, aside from Marc-Andre Fleury. And you say, how did they get Jonathan Marchessault? Well, they said, if you take Riley Smith and his bloated contract off of our hands, we'll give you Jonathan Marchessault because we're not going to re-sign him. Fair enough. Vegas re-signs him. He's their best player, like I said. And Riley Smith, not so bad himself. It's worked out pretty well.
No.
You look at Marc-Andre Fleury. They acquired him. You know, they said essentially we're leaving him open. He's yours if you want him. They obviously jumped at the chance. It almost seems like George McPhee has learned from his past mistakes of trading Forsberg for Erat. That is I told you this, Brayton. That is one of those trades that will go on your tombstone forever. It'll be he traded
one of the worst trades in history.
Yeah, he traded Philip Forsberg for Martin Erat, and holy hell, what a trade! But you know what? There's the ebbs and the flows. We see the ebbs and the flows, and we get to see this is the flow. That was the ebb, or whichever way that works. But anyways, if you think flows. If you think that this is a bad thing for the NHL that Vegas is doing good so fast, you know what's going to happen? How pissed are you going to be in a couple of years when they clamp down on the expansion draft and Seattle gets boned, and then Seattle has a bad 5, 6, 7 year stretch, and then you say, oh, they shouldn't have expanded to Seattle because Vegas did really good, and everybody got butthurt about it because you put a good GM or a smart guy in the office, and look at what happens. Pandemonium.
Right. And I mean, you look at this Vegas roster, you look at the team and how they've been playing, not only throughout this entire year, but especially through the Stanley Cup final. They're playing exactly to how the NHL is going to be fit for this year and the years to come down the road. They're playing with speed and skill, and then they also have those little bit of, you know, those characteristics of size and grit and all that stuff that you need to be a complete hockey team. I mean, George McPhee, you have to give him credit. He built a team out of nothing. He had nobody that was, you know, even qualified really to, you know, he had nobody on the team to start the year. He picks all these players. Everybody picks Vegas to be the worst team in the NHL or close to it. And they come out and they're playing a style of hockey that is fitting today's mold. And they're playing better than teams like the Sabres, for instance, that aren't even close to what today's mold of the NHL is. Sure, the Sabres have some pieces, but, I mean, Vegas, when you look from top to bottom, they're a pretty complete team with an exception of a few players of a team that plays with size, plays with speed, plays, you know, with skill. They've got defensemen that can move the puck, you know, from point A to point B, clean, crisp, quick. Even though, you know, their blue line is not a lot of big names, they're still a blue line that has chemistry and that has the ability to get the puck from transitioning from defense to offense real quickly and then play solid defensively. And, of course, they have Marc-Andre Fleury. You know, we know who Marc-Andre Fleury is, former first overall pick, and you know, he's been phenomenal not only in these playoffs but throughout the year. And I mean, I'm telling you what, if Marc-Andre Fleury continues to play he does through the Stanley Cup final, I don't care who wins the Stanley Cup. I mean, he's my Conn Smythe pick no matter what.
And you know what? I'm rooting for Vegas. I have been since the first day. I mean, granted, I can take credit because I was a smart ass and bought a Vegas shirt back about 14 months ago, I think it was. Yeah, 14 months ago.
I'm actually wearing a Vegas shirt right now.
It's a smart move. I bought you that Vegas. Didn't I bought you that Vegas shirt?
Yes, you did.
Boom. I remember that. Barely. What is my mind going to, man? I remember.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Clearly, because my brain has stayed in Vegas for the last 14 months, man. But I'll tell you what. I'm excited for a great Stanley Cup final, and I'm also excited for the Buffalo Sabres to be able to make some moves. We saw that they won the draft lottery. They're going to pick Rasmus Dahlin. Don't even waste my time. I'm not going to waste yours talking about, oh, they could trade Dahlin for XYZ. They could use him to retool the entire roster. No, you're not trading the number 1 overall pick. Rasmus Dahlin is the guy. He's better than whoever they're saying he's better than whoever you want to come up with, whether it's Erik Karlsson, whether it's They say he's the next Nick Lidstrom. They're saying he's the best prospect since Denny Potvin. I mean, there's the comparisons have got me drunk with power over here, with how lucky Buffalo was to win the first overall pick. I mean, they lost McDavid, they lost Ekblad, but finally they get their guy with Rasmus Dahlin.
I mean, you just look at everything that he brings to the table. He's just a complete package. I had the personal, pleasure of watching him throughout the entire World Junior Championship. And as a 17-year-old playing on a Swedish roster, who Sweden's very well known for their defensive play in any tournament, any international tournament that you can think of, they're always known for their solid defensive play. And as a 17-year-old, Rasmus Dahlin was a man amongst boys on the ice. And for a 17-year-old to be dominating as much as he did, that's just incredible. You don't see that very often, especially in a tournament like the World Juniors, where most of the best players are 18, 19, and 20 years old. He was 17 and was the best defenseman of the tournament. He was a media all-star. He was arguably the best player from Sweden overall, both in the offensive and the defensive end. I mean, this kid has a complete package of skills. He's really solid in the defensive end. He's reliable. He's smart. He knows how to clear pucks out of the zone. He knows how to get out of a sticky situation when he has the puck on his stick. And then when he's transitioning from defense to offense, I mean, he sees the ice incredibly well. You rarely ever see him looking down at the puck. And then, of course, his skating ability is, I think, his greatest attribute, is just the ability for him to be so shifty and quick on his feet. And his ability to go from point A to point B and to skate around everybody and make people that are twice his age look as silly as they do on the ice. I mean, you just look at that. At his ability to create offense as well. He's just something that the Sabres have been looking for, not only in an offensive player, but a defenseman nonetheless. They've been looking for somebody like that, and the Sabres are about to be gift-wrapped that with the first overall pick in this year's draft. And, I mean, it means a ton for the Sabres to win this pick, because he's going to be a player that will shore up the defense for 15, 20 years, hopefully. And with a player like Dahlin, Buffalo is not only going to be a favorable place to want to play, but they're also going to be a place that the other players in the NHL will know, hey, Buffalo is not only are they a great hockey market, but, they've got some pretty good talent with guys like Eichel, Middlestat, now Dahlin. Hey, maybe I should go play with Buffalo for a little bit. I mean, there's just so many great things to come for Buffalo. And I know that Jack Eichel and Casey Middlestat are just part of the picture, and Dahlin's part of the picture as well. But, I mean, having Rasmus Dahlin just takes it up another level.
When you mentioned that, players wanting to play for Buffalo, and I know, and if you're listening to the podcast, I do apologize. I know we're kind of rolling through things more like if you watch WWE and you watch Brock Lesnar just take someone to Suplex City. We are doing the Suplex City equivalent of a podcast tonight, where we're just hitting topic, because we want to talk about as much as possible tonight in the short amount of time that we have. But Brayton, you said players may want to play for Buffalo, and we heard. I mean, it's kind of old news now. But, I mean, it's already been through the ringer just a few times. But Gord Miller says that NHL sources were talking about Buffalo lunging into Tavares talks potentially with Dahlin going to Buffalo at this point, all but confirmed. Darren Dreger says there's no traction to that, but we can kind of run with it for a second if we want to. I mean, we've heard the talks, and this kind of brings me to like a John Tavares, Ryan O'Reilly type of situation here.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Rob Volman back in December of ESPN.com says that, John Tavares should make between $8 and $10 million per year. You've got Ryan O'Reilly making a couple $1 million less. So you can almost essentially trade O'Reilly to fit Tavares in there. But then again, you're kind of getting yourself in the same spot where, yes, Tavares scores a ton and he scores more than O'Reilly does. But you're getting to a point where if Eichel's your one and Middlestat's going to be your two, you're going to be playing John Tavares on your third line, paying him a ton of cash. So that could potentially become a problem. But then again, you can't. It's hard to sit here and say, oh yeah, you can't sign John Tavares now because you're going to pay Rasmus Dahlin in 5, 6, 7 years, because that's just the wrong way to set up your hockey team. But before I let you give me your thoughts on that, Brayton, the one thing I want to mention is Ryan O'Reilly. He's been a soldier. Like, remember when Kellen Winslow screamed, "I'm an effing soldier," after that one game in Cleveland that one time? I don't remember what game it was, but it's a pretty funny YouTube clip. At this point, even especially after the World Championships, I'm just to the point where I am mentally and physically exhausted by the presence of Ryan O'Reilly. They played a game this morning, Brayton, on your radio show, the one that you produce, Howard and Jeremy, their show. And they played 4 clips of Ryan O'Reilly and said, can you guess which one is which? And essentially it's Ryan O'Reilly saying the same exact thing at 4 different times of the season. And it's the same exact line every time. It's, I've got to be better. I'm just making lazy mistakes. And, you know, if I want, I know what I have to do to be good, and I just need to get myself there. But what if Ryan O'Reilly at the end of the day was just like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get you 60 points, 60 plus points a season. I'm going to bust my tail and win a boatload of faceoffs. I mean, last year, NHL record for most faceoffs won in a season. And I'm going to give you some shoddy leadership. If you brought that to the table, people might take that. People might say, you know what? Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm cool with that. But instead, you know, people are expecting more, and he's not bringing that to the table. And I think I'm over it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation with Ryan O'Reilly is a very, I wouldn't say troublesome, but it's something that's very hard to grasp. It's something that we've seen how skilled and talented he really can be. I mean, the first year he was here, it was like, oh man, Ryan O'Reilly, man, this is the guy we traded for. Why would a team like Colorado ever trade Ryan O'Reilly? He's going to be really good for Buffalo. He fits the mold. He's blue collar. He's hardworking. He wins faceoffs. He's a good two-way centerman. He's going to be great for Buffalo. But then the past 2 years have been I've got to be better. And he's taking lulls in his game. And we hear what he says, and we see what he does on the ice. And sometimes he's great, and sometimes he makes these incredible plays. And other times it's just like, what are you doing out there? Why aren't you doing? Why aren't you the same player that you were in the first year here in Buffalo? And to have him here under contract for another 5 years, and if he continues the way he played, which is inconsistent at most times, it's troublesome. It's difficult to grasp because he is such a talented player and he's got a lot going for him. But there's just something about Ryan O'Reilly that is infuriating with his play. It's inconsistencies. It's the stuff that he says off the ice, and you want that all to go away. But is it going to go anyway anytime soon? I mean, he said all the same stuff he did this year is the same as last year. And I get it. The team sucked. The team that he played on wasn't good. And especially this year, they finished dead last, and now they're going to be picking first overall. I mean, that's something that nobody, I don't think, envisioned for the Sabres this year at all. But at the same point, when is that tide going to turn for you, Ryan? When is the tide? When are things going to change for your game? Because you've been saying this for 2 years almost. When is that shift in your play going to change from being inconsistent and just okay to being where you were back in the 2015-2016 season when they actually played pretty well? I mean, it's just one of those things that it's frustrating for Ryan O'Reilly. It's frustrating to hear that. And is it going to get better? We don't know. He's got to put in the work himself. He's got to figure things out on his own. And hopefully he can turn things around. But, I mean, again, if the Sabres get a deal that they can't refuse in a trade for Ryan O'Reilly, then by all means, you just have to trade him. I mean, not necessarily have to trade him, but, if the right deal is in place, you almost, probably should make that move. Because, I mean, if you're clearing up $7.5 million of cap space and you can add a couple of other pieces that can be a benefit to the roster, which brings speed and skill, I'd be all for it. I'd be willing to do that. And, because Ryan O'Reilly, sure, he's gifted and he's skilled, but he certainly is not the best of a skater.
You might be able to diversify Ryan O'Reilly's cap hit and get better. I mean, you're not going to, I guess, an addition by subtraction type of situation, because it almost seems like back in the day when the Buffalo Sabres had Pominville and Vanek and decided to make Pominville captain over Vanek, and it was immediately, you could feel the tide turning. I think that when you saw Jack become the clear-cut favorite for the captaincy, and then when Ryan O'Reilly wasn't named captain this latest offseason, which obviously most of us didn't expect to happen, but once it was kind of officially unofficial, I think that's when the ship sailed, because I'm starting to believe that Ryan O'Reilly he's a very good hockey player. I don't think he's a great hockey player, but he can be a very big asset to a team looking for the type of player that he is. And I'm thinking that he's probably a second line center who you're putting up against lesser talent, but you're giving him pretty much all the faceoffs you can. Take some pressure off of him and let him go out there and play his game. I think Ryan O'Reilly would be a lot more attractive if his cap hit wasn't so high. And I certainly think that it may necessitate Buffalo holding on to him until after July 1st because of his contract being a signing bonus. So if Buffalo pays a signing bonus, but then again, that happens, the cost of trading goes up because obviously Buffalo dumps all that cash into him, and then you want to acquire him for pennies on the dollar. So there's a lot of scenarios, but I think I'm definitely buying the talk that in the right place, Ryan O'Reilly can be the right player. But I think at this point in time in Buffalo, almost feels like he's outworn his welcome, and it's mostly not his fault. I mean, there are some things that certainly are his fault, but I would say maybe 75% of it, there's just, it's not, his game is not what Buffalo needed from him. Buffalo acquired him with the thought that he would continue to develop, and he has in certain aspects, but for the most part, he's still the same guy in Colorado, which wasn't a bad player. It's just, he's outworn his welcome, just like he did in Colorado, and I think it's just time for both sides to move on, and no better time than now, especially with Jack going to such a big cap hit. And I think certainly that you give Jack the keys to the car next season, make him the captain, and put up or shut up. It's certainly not. No one's expecting Buffalo to be Vegas next season, but come out and get 85, 90 points. Maybe that's too much to ask, but just make that adjustment, make the next step, whatever that next step is, and bring. I think if you trade O'Reilly, you bring in a strong veteran guy who was a captain or has been kind of a leader for another team, and just let Jack bounce off him and go from there.
Yeah, with Ryan, you'd like to see his. I mean, if his game turns around and he can figure things out, then he's a perfect second, third line centerman for the Buffalo Sabres. But again, that cap hit just, man, that can really restrict this team from doing some things that they might want to do down the road. And for the type of production that he's put up in the past 2 years, it's also concerning. I'd love to keep a guy like Ryan O'Reilly because I think he's a good, he's a decent character guy. And what he can do on the ice for you is really important. He wins the key faceoffs. He does bring that offense, and he's really reliable on both ends. That's important to a hockey team. But at the same time, if you can't do that consistently, and you're getting paid the money that you're getting paid to not be consistent enough, I mean, there's just no other option for you. I mean, Jason Bottrell's got a lot of work to do this offseason, and I think he's going to be relatively busy, but at the same time, he's really got to be methodical about this. He really has to put it into perspective. Okay, is a Ryan O'Reilly trade going to be worth it? Are there other players that are going to be here that can help fill his void if we trade him? Or is he going to be a player that we can rely on down the road? He's just going through some rough patches, but if he can turn things around, we'll be okay. And I think that this year has been helpful for him in making that decision. But even then, this offseason, again, if a team makes an offer you can't refuse, then you just got to take the trade. You got to get that cap off you got to get that number off of your salary cap. And then you'll be able to make some other moves. Maybe even a John Tavares move if you really want to. But, I mean, even then, you've still got some players to re-sign for the future. You can still make a couple of additions that can be beneficial for your future that are outside of this team. There's just a lot of things that you can see going both ways with the Ryan O'Reilly situation. But, I mean, as of right now, if there's a trade that's too good to resist, I'm making that trade.
Now, last thing before we wrap this quick cast up here, our buddy, friend of the pod, Jared, over on Twitter, at JXREDNHL, we asked people to ask some questions, and he actually asked a very good question. For me, it's fairly open and shut, but I'll read the question here. It says, you can bring one defenseman or one forward not named Briere or Drury back from any 2000 to 2010 Sabres team to magically be in their prime and insert into the Sabres lineup next season on a 5-year deal. Who are you taking? Also, they carry their cap hit from their time playing too. For me, simple as this, I would take Brian Campbell, and I would take probably Max Afinogenov, but I'm thinking Vanek in his prime was pretty damn good, but I just feel like Max Afinogenov. I was going to say, I think Max Afinogenov in today's NHL would be a lot of fun to watch, especially with a guy like Jack Eichel. So yeah, I would say Campbell and Fangenov.
Now, would it be all right for me to say that the old Pominville, if we could bring the old Pominville back, that would apply, or is that a little touchy because he's already on the roster?
You could have him like when you play MLB The Show, and you can have those Legends teams where it's like I have David Ortiz at DH, I have Babe Ruth at first base, Ryan Sandberg.
I got a better one than the old Pominville. I'm going to bring back the Tim Connolly before the concussion against Ottawa in the Eastern Conference Final. Tim Connolly before his concussion, or Eastern Conference Semifinal. Tim Connolly before he had that concussion against Ottawa was incredible. He was dominant offensively and just making plays left and right. I mean, the reason why, he was part of the main reason why the Sabres won that game one against Ottawa, and that crazy game where it was 7-6 the final. I think he scored 2 goals in that game, and not only that, but the series before against the Flyers, he was dynamic, he was dominant. And that Tim Connolly, I would love to have back on the Sabres. He'd be the guy that I'd bring back for the Sabres, and at his cap hit, whatever it was back then. The defense, that's a tough one because let's face it, the Sabres haven't had necessarily a really good defenseman over the past few years. Brian Campbell's certainly a good option. I think I'd take Brian Campbell too. Just the way he was for this team, so offensively gifted, but yet he was solid defensively. I would bring him back. Maybe even a guy like, I don't know, an old Henrik Tallinder when he was originally with the Sabres before he kind of went off on his own path before coming back. So the first stint, Henrik Tallinder, maybe I'd bring back. It's a tough one because there's so many good options, but I definitely think for the forward, Max Afinogenov would be a good option. The old Jason Pominville would be a good option, but I'd take Tim Connolly.
You could have also said John Scott. We were accepting that answer as well.
No, I'll pass.
Corey Conacher. Anyways, I guess that really wraps the quick cast up. We did this about 25 minutes. That was good for us.
Real quick. What do you think? What do you think about John Tavares? Do you think the Sabres should target him? Do you think they should go after him? Or
I think they should, but I think especially with Lou Lamoriello coming to the island, there's no way. If Tavares leaves, I think if John Tavares leaves, I'm buying the hype train that he could end up in San Jose. I like that idea. That seems pretty fun. I would say, if he doesn't re-sign in New York or in Long Island, I'm sorry, I would say I want to see him in San Jose for sure.
Yeah. Well, I will. Just
and real quick, just to kind of go back on my point real fast, I think it's one of those situations where you're not in that spot right now. While yes, you don't have that opportunity to sign players like that, you're going to be paying him for 3 or 4 years. Out of that 7-year deal you sign him to.
Right. 2,
3, 4 years is going to be literally just paying him to just go get points, and you're not going to go anywhere. And then you're ready to make the next step. I think when you're ready to make the next step, that's when Buffalo's not in that spot right now. And unfortunately, you can't get guys like John Tavares all the time. But again, just avoid it. Don't kill the cap.
Yep. I'm just going to go out there and say this right off the top. Take a good, hard, long pass on John Tavares. Yes, he is a very skilled player and he is exceptionally talented, but for what he's probably going to sign, it is going to be way too much that the Sabres, maybe not the Sabres can handle, but it's just going to be way too much for him to sign. And then given everything else that the Sabres are going to want to do in the future, granted, he would probably be a really great second line or even first line centerman right behind or ahead of Jack Eichel. But at the same time, I'm just not so sold on John Tavares as maybe some other people are. To pay him, I know you mentioned Rob Volman might make $8 to $10 million. I think some team's going to overpay for him big time. And I don't want the Sabres to be that team that will overpay for him. If he comes to Buffalo and he signs a reasonable contract, by all means, I'll take it. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to want to get a big contract. And if he stays on the island, good for him. He was drafted there. He's they're kind of their franchise guy. But at the same time, I'm looking at the John Tavares situation, and I'm just thinking, I don't know if I really want any part of that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have him, but again, it's not one of the situations where I'm dying to have him here. So, I guess with that, you got anything else today? Because I'm empty.
No, I think I'm pretty good, and hoping that things will pick up here because I'm ready to get to the NHL draft. I'm dying to get the chance to see Rasmus Dahlin in Buffalo blue and gold. And, hey, Matt Molson just sold his house in Amherst for, $1.1 million or wherever he was living. So that might most likely means he's given up the number 26. The second you draft Rasmus Dahlin and you get him up on the stage, you better have a Sabres jersey that has the number 26 on it.
If that's the case,
Damn.
I will finally change my Thomas Vanek jersey. Even though it's like a jersey foul, I don't care. You kiss my ass. Jersey foul, bro.
As will I.
It's like my my Evander Kane jersey. That was a Derek Roy. That was a Steve Ott. That wasn't Evander Kane. The next guy to wear number 9, I'll still get it changed because you know what? I started the tradition. I got to keep it up. I don't care. Come at me.
Jack
I'm going to go buy.
Not going to change to number 9, right?
Maybe Jack Eichel will change to number 69. Who knows? Pretty nice.
Now we're getting into some nice details here.
I was going to say I'm about to be the guy who's going to go buy a Marc-Andre Fleury Stanley Cup Final jersey. So hockey has done me well these past couple of years. That's for sure.
Yes, it has.
But hey, Brayton is at BJ Wilson WGR. I am at Wolfe BLTD. Give me a follow. Give us a follow. My screen just went black. Let's try to get that back here. Here we're back. Follow us on Twitter. Check us out. BetterLiveThanDead.com. Brayton, I appreciate you joining me tonight, taking the time.
I'm always here for you, man. Feel free to always reach out to me when you want to do this.
Well, hey, and maybe we can podcast on 6-9 because we'll be together on 6-9. Not that sounded terrible. I'm just leaving it there. That sounded horrible.
That just should be a podcast day every year for us is on 6-9.
That should be. Just talk about the nicest things in life.
The nicest podcast of the year. That's what we'll call it.
I like that. We'll get working on that. But hey, we are better live than dead.
And of course, you are not.
We'll see you We'll catch you sometime soon. Appreciate you tuning in, guys.
Bye, guys.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.